Hey, I'm Matt Hudgens, and he's Dave Mulvaney, and this is Profitability MD. Dave, how you doing today, buddy?
Great, Matt. How about you?
Life is good. Life is good. Spring is here. I love it. The Masters was last weekend. Kind of get you started, get you going, get you all pumped up for the spring.
The Masters is always that sign that spring is close.
Right. All right. Episode 121, characteristics of a successful entrepreneur. Characteristics of a So where do you want to start with that?
Well, what do you think is my daughter asked this a while back and said, what do you think the most important characteristic to be an entrepreneur? That's what the question was like. What do you think the most important characteristic to be an entrepreneur is? And as I thought about it, I mean, that's a heck of a question, because is it one? But my answer was, I think persistence. That's
what I was going to say. Persistence.
You probably start with persistence, because entrepreneurs tend to be like the ones that are successful. Well, I'm glad you added it. Characteristics of a successful entrepreneur. Because if you're going to be successful, you sure better be willing to get knocked down and keep getting back up, because not everything is going to go the way you expect it to go.
Yeah, no, exactly right. We were persistence. We had that stat before. 80% of sales require 5 follow-up phone calls. 44% of sales reps give up after the first try. All right, 44% of sales people give up after the first no, 22 after the second no, 14 after the third no, and 12 after the 4 no's. That tells you that 92% of sales, 90% of people give up after 4 no's, and only 8% of salespeople ask for the order a 5th time, which means that 8% does 90% of all the business. And
so I would say that if you're the entrepreneur who doesn't follow up past the first time, you darn sure better be a good closer, because
Right. Well, so we were talking to one of I have 2 girls in college, talking to one of their friends, talking about getting jobs, and one of them, getting ready to graduate. And the idea was, persistence, right? You got to go. And I was going to say one of the other things was you got to be persistent. You got to network, right? You've always got to have your tentacles in several different areas, right? So I've got a friend who he looks for one job at a time, and he talked to this person, and he's going to wait till the next interview to the next. No. We need to be talking to 5 different companies, 10 different prospects, 50 different prospects, and we'll just see which ones fall through. We don't just do one until they say no 5 times, and then the next one until they say no 5 times. We need to network and have them all going on at the same time. And I can't tell you how many people just do one thing at a time. I'm just going to wait to see if this thing at Coca-Cola turns out. I'm going to wait to see if this thing at Home Depot turns out.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta network. And then the network to that, though, that's even better, would be the network to the networking, right? So especially when I was younger, and I'm still pretty good, the networking is the key, right? So I'm not asking Dave Mulvaney for a job or to buy my product. What I'm asking Dave is, what are your thoughts and your opinions on my product, on my service? And then the magic question is, do you know anybody else that I can talk to? More specifically, do you know 2 or 3 other people I can talk to? And that's the network effect, because I don't ask you for the sale, but if you like it, you'll end up buying. But what I did do is I got to 2 or 3 more people. And then what I do to that next interview, 2 or 3 more people, 2 or 3 more people. So you can expand your network really quickly.
Okay, and I got to unpack what you just said, because what you did there was you overcame 2 things. You overcame some fears and overcame objections at the same time. A lot of people are afraid to ask for the sale. So while you're networking, you're talking to somebody who you want to ask them for the sale, but you have maybe a fear they might say no, or fear that you'll come off salesy or pushy. So you packaged it in such a way that you overcame the fear, but at the same time, you also overcame the objection. You put them in a position where you didn't say, can you tell me one person, can you tell, you said, who are 2 or 3 people, the way you phrased it. So all in one, the way you phrased it, you put them in a position that you overcame their objection of saying, I don't know anybody. And so all of that in one big sentence, Matt.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
So I think, yeah, overcoming fears and overcoming objections is a characteristics of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, because we all face fears. And I mean, a lot of times people will say you're fearless. It's like, no, I'll take action when I see fear. So
right.
Difference.
Oh, that was interesting too. It's funny. So I was talking to another advisor friend of mine yesterday, and the fear was raising prices. How much do I charge for a financial plan, for a college planning plan? How much do I charge? This is what he was talking about. And it's a process where it's almost like you have enough confidence and you're charging this amount, and then you're going to charge that amount. I think, what was it? I think it might have been Dan Sullivan who said, what's the highest you think you should charge? Whatever, name a price, and then raise it by 20%. And then you're like, holy crap, I'm going to provide some really good value and really good, stuff for that price.
Ray Edwards also says, what's the highest you think you should charge, and then double it.
Yeah, even better. That's
what he always says, right. And then double it. Because especially when you're super busy and somebody comes to you and needs your help, said, charge like whatever the maximum you think you should charge and double it. And if they say yes, you'll find the time to get that client done.
Right. It's almost like the real estate market right now, right? So the real estate market's going crazy all over the place, right? And it's like they're asking these astronomical prices for their houses, and it's like, oh, let's just see if somebody will take it, right? We're in that market right now where people are taking it, right? Whereas a year ago, 18 months ago, you'd say, oh, I want X amount for my house. I'd say, oh, you're crazy, Dave. That's way overpriced. And now you're like, well, somebody will come along and make that price. There's so little inventory that you're seeing these astronomical purchase prices, and it's almost that same concept in reverse. Well, I'd sell my house if I got $5 million. Well, darn it. Now somebody's making a $5 million bid and you didn't really think you were going to sell it, right? So that's a good, overcoming objections or fear. There was another part of that which said, you may not be your typical client, right? So you may not pay for maid service, but your neighbor would, right? You may not pay for landscaping services, but your neighbor would, right? So Dan Sullivan always talks about go into the check writers. Don't ask yourself, don't go to your friends, don't go to your family. They're all going to poo-poo the idea, right? Go to the check writers, which is what I was kind of alluding to on my networking, is what I call informational interviews. Hey, if I offer this type of product or service, would you be interested? How would you phrase that? What's the pros and cons of that? Do you know anybody else? Give it two or the other people that I can talk to and get their opinions on this product or service. And the idea is you go into the check writers, not your mother or your dad's friend.
So then that brings up another trait, which would be creativity. You can't just do the status quo. You have to be creative about how you go and get clients. Now, granted, that includes like when you're writing your $1 million message, you got to be creative about ways to package words so creativity is almost always a characteristic of successful entrepreneurs.
Oh, that's perfect, right? So got to be creative in your market dominating position. Got to get creative with your joint venture partners. You and I talk about joint venture problems all the time. You got to get creative with your follow-up campaign. I mean, they're basic structures, but the more creative or interesting it is.
Don't get too creative with your with income tax. So we'll leave that at that. You can be somewhat creative, but don't be too creative.
Compelling offer. Be creative with your compelling offer. Be creative with your upsells and your downsells, right? And your packaging. When we talked about combo packaging, we talked about that with being creative with. And it's amazing to me how many people, again, I keep going back to this joint ventures and alliance. I get distracted, but it's being creative in that way, in that so many people are so just trying to sell what they do. And they don't realize that they could partner up with somebody who has a complementary product, a builder with a real estate agent, a builder with a hardwood floor guy. I don't know, right? That, the car wash guy with the pressure washer with the roofer with the landscaper. Right, that just those little joint ventures, being creative with them is, I think, the key to success. Right, that you didn't necessarily think of something new and out of the box. It was almost like you just had a different perspective or point of view on the same topic, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the areas that I find, for instance, I think of you, and you're very trustworthy in that, like, your clients can depend on you all the time, to provide. And so you can put trustworthy or honest in the same. See, everybody always thinks of the entrepreneur who's like, oh, he's making a killing, but he's scamming people, and that never lasts. The real successful entrepreneurs that have long-term success over long periods of time, they're trustworthy. They're trustworthy with their clients. They're trustworthy with their money. They're trustworthy with their with everything. They tend to be. If you look at some of the most successful entrepreneurs, they tend to be married a long time. So they stay married. Well, that also has to do with trust. So their nature is they're trustworthy as a human being, I think.
That's a great point. We have one of our people that owns a home healthcare business, and trustworthy because they get to take care of their own mother, right? Their own mother or mother-in-law. I forget exactly what the story was, but it was something about mother-in-law got sick, and we needed to figure out a way to take care of her because I worked and my wife worked, and so we came up with this home care thing, and then we were getting the hoodlums out there, and we were no, we need to do it right. So then we had to do it right. And then once we did it and figured out how to do it for ourselves, some friends started asking us to do it for them. And then we, turned that into a business. But that's trustworthy, right? That's trustworthy. That's also, you and I mentioned before, solving a problem, right? Solving a problem for somebody. They solve their own problem. I think Dean Jackson talks about that a lot. Maybe Dan Sullivan, I forget which one. Solve your own problem, then you could sell that solution to somebody else who's got the same problem you do.
So I wonder if that falls under like, entrepreneurs are problem solvers, or they see opportunity in problems. Is that vision, or is that, those are two different things, but are they problem solvers? I think they tend to be, but also do they see opportunity in the problem? So is that attitude? I mean, so there's, you see there's so many traits that cross over.
Yeah, self-confidence is a good one. You just mentioned like visionary, and that's a term Gino Wickman uses a lot. He's actually a disciple of Dan Sullivan, and Gino Wickman has a book, Traction, and talks about the entrepreneur operating system, which is a great book, by the way, and visionary. But I've also had those people that are too visionary. In other words, they're always working on the next vision and never actually capture the cash.
Yeah,
right?
You got to have an integrator, is what Gino Wickman would bring into it. But that means, so you have a vision. I like this has been a statement I've been using a lot, that action is the doing part of vision. So you can have all the vision you want, but then you have to start doing, and that's action. And that's the doing part of vision. I kind of got it from a Ray Edwards quote. He always says, writing is the doing part of thinking. I'm like, well, if that's the case for visionaries, then basically action is the doing part of vision. So you can be a visionary, and that's great. I'm a visionary. I see things that don't exist, but I also know that, all right, when I see this, I got to put a team together to make that happen.
Right. You got to make it happen. You got to take action. That's what we're talking about too. And we've talked about that before, where you got to have the vision, and then you got to be the one to take action, and then you got to be persistent about taking your action. It's like losing weight, right? Or getting in shape, right? Here's the plan. We all know how we get in shape or lose weight. You eat less and exercise more, right? There's the strategy, right? There's the roadmap. Eat less, work out more. Then you've got to take action and be consistent or persistent with it, right? Hey, if I'm going to exercise 30 minutes a day, I'm going to eat whatever, I forget, 2,000 calories, 1,800 calories, whatever it is, right? Then you would need to measure it, because there's this whole thing about, measuring actually gets, they talk about if you weigh yourself every morning, then you're more conscious of what you're eating during the day because you're trying to lose weight. And you'll be like, gosh, I gained a pound yesterday. I thought I did a good job. I'm going to do extra good today, right? So there's this whole concept of measuring your progress. Where I was versus today versus yesterday versus, Dan Sullivan talks about staying out of the gap, right? I'm not at my ideal weight, but I am, 3 pounds lighter than I was a week ago, right? That don't say stay out of the gap. The gap is I'm not at my ideal weight, the progress is, well, I'm 3 pounds lighter and I'm exercising 30 minutes a day and I'm doing the right things. I know eventually I'll get there. So there's a persistent, there's a vision, there's an action, all that's kind of integrated, like we just said, that you got to kind of do them all to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and you take these, it's funny. By the way, if you're watching or listening to this episode, we didn't talk about this. We just said, what are the characteristics of an entrepreneur? And we're literally going through, and you start realizing when you start unpacking it, entrepreneurs are unique individuals because they tend to be very tenacious when it comes to their goals. If they really want something, they get single-minded of focus and going after something. And that's I think these tend to be characteristics that everybody could have, but not everybody does have.
Right. And then I'm thinking right now, talking about motivated and self-confident. And so I've built, my businesses the way that I wanted to be built business when people say it could have been done that way, right? You look at, everybody talks about Elon Musk. Well, darn, he's built the businesses he said that you couldn't be built, right? He's got the Tesla thing and he's got the rocket launch, SpaceX. Nobody said you could do that. You got Jeff Bezos. Nobody said you could do Amazon to go to books, and instead of books now he sells everything under the sun, right? So part of it is, you kind of told me I couldn't do it, and I'm doing it anyway, right? So there's that personality, and that's not a business personality. That could be a sports. It's like I remember you told me once on your workout, you're doing 10, you're going to do 12 more just because. Like, well, I forget, you had a saying like that because you said like your old gymnastics coach or something.
It's my one more theory.
One more, that's what it was.
Yeah, because I knew that in order to really push myself, I couldn't think about the size of the accomplishment. And I was an All-American gymnast, but during the year becoming that, we would do back handspring after back handspring after back handspring. And everybody on our team that was doing those all wanted to, basically, if you were the last one, did the last back handspring, you didn't have to run that night. And so you got out of it. So everybody didn't want to run. There's only 4 of us on varsity, and only 3 ever got to compete. So, but at the same time, you didn't want to be, and I would never be I would never run because I would just keep going. One more. I just kept saying one more. That is just, I wanted to win, but that's enormous persistence. It is, I can tell you, I can look back on that point in my life and say that is probably the characteristic trait that has the most significance in overcoming obstacles, because sometimes the obstacles in business get really big. And so when you can just say, all right, I don't have to create the entire company tomorrow afternoon. But what I am going to do is I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to have a good attitude. I'm going to have a right attitude about it. And I'm going to go after it tomorrow. I'm not going to worry about the rest of the month. Because sometimes as entrepreneurs, financially, there's a lot of people struggling right now. There's people up north who their businesses aren't open. And they don't even know, they're trying to figure out, you may be listening. You may be trying to figure out how you're going to, get this whole thing accomplished. Well, don't try to accomplish the whole thing. Take one step at a time. And I think that takes focus. If just to focus on something small instead of something big. But successful entrepreneurs tend to be focused. And sometimes you have to really put your focus on something smaller than the big thing. That's where visionaries can get, Well, that goes back to, we were talking and I forget who says this. It's like, do one thing until you make your $1 million, right? And then you could have a second business, a third business, a fourth. People talk about different streams of income, right? And it's like, well, why don't you just get really good at what you're doing now, and then you can worry about your other streams of income. When you were talking earlier, it kind of reminds me of what's the typical entrepreneurial's journey? And we've talked about this before in the past, but it's like most of the entrepreneurs we come across are a couple of different, which was, let's say that you get out of college and you go into construction because your dad's into construction or a friend of the family's in construction. And then that guy gets old and he says, hey, you want to take over my general contracting business, right? So
yeah, I've been doing it all along, and Uncle Joe is a nice guy, and I think I can do what he does, and so I'll just take it over, right? The moderation of that is, got out of college, you start working construction and general contracting, and then you're like, well, Uncle Joe isn't that smart. Hell, I can be my own general contractor. I can do this myself. And so you figure out that you can do it. It wasn't that much rocket science. So you'll go start your own. Again, I'm just using general contractor as the example. Could have been an HVAC guy, could have been a landscaper. Well, hell, I'll just do it myself. You might not have known that you were going to be a general contractor. You might not have known you were going to be a landscaper, but you just kind of tripped your way into it and figured out, I learned from Uncle Joe, so I'll just keep on doing it. And I'm just saying Uncle Joe could be, Mr. Joe. Sure. Same thing. Gosh, Uncle Joe isn't that smart. I think I could do this myself. That's how most of my entrepreneurs came out of. Very few, and even Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they didn't know they were going to own Amazon and Tesla and whatever it is, Rocket X or whatever. They didn't know that at the time, right? It kind of evolves for them. So there is this thing of persistence and creativity and vision, but also you said adaptability earlier, but evolution, right? And what happens to these guys is they get really good at this one thing. They get really good at selling light bulbs. You were really good at selling light bulbs, right? But then you got to backfill in all the, I got to learn marketing, I got to learn sales, I got to learn accounting, and how to hire and fire people, right? There's a whole back end side of that.
And there's the percentage of entrepreneurs that graduated college is a much smaller number than entrepreneurs who didn't graduate college. So there's a lot of,
is that right? Okay.
Yeah, it's like massively more. It's like 77% of all business owners in the U.S. did not graduate college. Didn't mean they didn't go, but so that means I don't know what characteristic it is, but somehow they know in themselves they're kind of rebellious a little bit. I don't want to use rebellious because that may not be the right word, but there's a characteristic that they got at some point and they're like, I ain't doing that. So they like to swim upstream or what, but they, like a lot of them tried college and it wasn't for them. But at the same time,
right.
So I don't know if that's a characteristic, but it's if it's prevalent in like well over 70%, that says there's something there that they saw that wasn't for them. And so is that, I don't know, is that facing reality? Is that,
or is that self-confidence, or is that just, stubbornness, persistence, right? But it's actually, that's a very interesting conversation because you start looking back and who are the most successful business owners that you know, right? And how did they get there, right? And, my dad did it, my uncle did it. I just tripped into it. I didn't know I was going to be an engineer. Well, I knew I was going to be an engineer. Didn't know I was going to own my own engineering firm, right? I don't know. I didn't know anything about lighting. I'm just a really good sales guy, right? I didn't know anything about financial services. I'm just a really good sales guy, right? Yeah. Or I was a really good stock picker, and so therefore I went in financial services, but I didn't know I was going to, get into business coaching, right? That it's you don't know how you're going to end up there, but there must be something, like you said, underneath it. How about that? The ability to learn or the interest to continually learn, right? I think that is a big one, is a continual learner.
You
right?
Can probably put that under hunger. There's a hunger for knowledge. There's a hunger for knowledge. I mean, this is a characteristic. There's a hunger for knowledge there, but it's skewed knowledge in that they want to use it to their advantage to make money. I mean, let's be upfront about it. I mean,
right. Or how to do it better. Yeah.
Right. How to do it better to their advantage. Entrepreneurs could be athletes. But they'll study their sport. Like, that was something about Michael Jordan. He was a student of basketball, and Tiger Woods was a student. So his hunger was, I am going to learn why the ball spins. I want to know everything about golf balls. One of the reasons Tiger Woods was so good is because he understood clubs. He helped design clubs at a very young age. Well, how could he design them? Because he studied his trade, he studied what, and that comes from hunger.
That's a great point. So like I think back, and so now you look at your own journey. I look back at my journey, but just also about that learning and that continuing learning. And I've given this advice to kids coming out of college, clients' kids and friends of the family's kids, that It's almost like, go and don't just do your job, but learn everybody else's job too. And not only learn what everybody else's job is, but how are they paid and motivated, right? So then you understand the whole system, right? So if you go in and you're inside sales for HVAC supply, right? I'm just using an example because actually one of my friend's son is doing this out in Vegas, right? And it's like, well, don't just learn about inside sales and who are the outside sales guys? And oh, by the way, you should figure out who gets paid more and why, okay? And then who's their boss, okay? And what do their bosses do and how do they get motivated and paid? And then who's that guy's bosses? And so as I go back through my career and it's like my first job, it's like I interned one summer at Merrill Lynch. And by the end of that summer, I knew everything about that office. I knew how much every person in the office made. I knew kind of how they made it. This guy sells bonds. This guy sells stocks. This guy sells to old people. This is the office manager. This is what she does. This is the branch manager. This is what he does. And I knew everything about the Merrill Lynch Buckhead office after my summer internship, right? Then I go into my first job. I knew everything in the first year about, then I go to over here. And there's this continual learning. And then what you mentioned before, so when I started my own business, I was working with another smaller business, trying to buy them out, and it didn't work out. But I did that. How would I run this business if it were me, right? That I know how they're running the business. How would I run the business? How would I build it? What do I like? What's working? What isn't working? And how would I redo it? To my advantage, right? Better for me, a better lifestyle for me, a better efficiency. I like to say efficiency for me, right? And if you're a builder and you worked for a builder, you'd be like, oh, I worked with a general contractor I used earlier. And it'd be like, well, this guy, he's a great general contractor, great with people, but he doesn't keep good records. So, when I start my general contractor, I want to have a CRM and workflows so I know where everything is so it doesn't fall through the crack because Uncle Joe over here just drops the ball all the time, right? So you could be the the construction kid learning how the whole general contractor works and how do we find our subs and when do we get them, how to coordinate them and how would you do it better? So then when you start your general contractor, anyway, that is a big deal to me in that continual learning. And 95% of people, so I worked at several big corporations, a bank and a big Fortune 500 company. 95% of people in that job are just doing their job. They don't care about me doing my job. They don't care about the neighbor doing that job. They're just doing their job 9 to 5 and they come in and they go home. But because of that, they're not really contributing to the benefit of the overall company. They're just doing but you got to ask those questions. How can I make his job easier? If I did this, would that make his easier? That's how you would get promotions inside a big Fortune 500 company, right? If you just did your job, that's kind of what they're paying you for. In order to get the promotion, you'd have to be doing a little more than your job or a little more insightful or helpful.
So that would be, would put that under not critically analytical, like optimistically analytical. Like I want to analyze all this stuff to see how it could give me an advantage, but also to see how maybe I could do it better. Because, what Elon Musk didn't do is he didn't invent the automobile, but he did make a better one for sure. What Bezos did not invent the book. He also didn't invent online sales.
Retail, correct.
What he did do better than the U.S. Postal Service and United Parcel Service is he became better at logistics than anybody on the planet.
Better at logistics, right? He is not a better retailer. He's a better logisticer.
he moves products better, but that required analytics, and so all by accident now he's got UPS and the U.S. Postal Service on their heels. Imagine that. It's something you'd never think would be possible that somebody could pass UPS but here's Bezos and he's way past them in terms of the amount of product that he moves efficiently. I don't want to say total amount of product. I have no idea on those categories, but that's because he was analytical and he wanted to know everything. If you read it, I've read his story. It's an interesting story. And I don't think Bezos graduated college either. Another guy who went into college and didn't graduate. I could be wrong. But so these characteristics, why study the characteristics of entrepreneurs? Because if there's one thing that is assured about entrepreneurs, that seek knowledge, never stop learning. It's that attitude. All of these are attitudes that anybody could learn. I mean, Zig Ziglar used to do a whole thing on this. Attitudes can be learned. They're not skills. They're
and that's a great point. So not only can this stuff be learned, it could be that you just need to refresh your own, right? So when you started, you're an entrepreneur. We talked to business owners. So when you started the business, you were aggressive and young and eager learning, and maybe some of the fires burned out a little bit now. So I would challenge you to kind of look at some of these traits that you just maybe need to, crank it up a little notch or reinvigorate these certain aspects, the continual learning, the improvement. You talked before we got online about a guy who's had a business and it's just time to mix it up and make it better, right? That he's trying to recharge his own batteries, right? I was talking to a client, and he's been in this business for 15 years, 17 years, and feels like he's almost at the end of the career. And now we've been talking, I'm reinvigorated. He's like, well, hell, I got another 10 years left. I'm in my mid 50s and I got another 10 years. We could do it one more time. And so we would tell you some of these characteristics to remind you of, you probably have these in you, or you could develop them or reinvigorate them or recharge them. Right. And so the full circle would be, characteristics of an entrepreneur. But this is kind of stuff we talk about in our mastermind group, right? This is what we do in our mastermind group, and it's the characteristics, it's the challenges, it's the opportunities, it's the creativity, it's the persistence to become the successful business person, right? And we talk about, you need 3 things to be successful. You need commitment, a roadmap, and a support system. We've got the roadmap and the support system in our mastermind group. We just need your commitment to be successful, right? That's what this is about. These characteristics are things that can be learned, can be amplified, can be reinvigorated, all of the above, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I get all excited about this stuff.
No, and it's good, and it's really good, because I don't think, look, if there's one thing we all need every now and then, is that recharge.
Yeah.
And I think after being at an event end of last week,
right,
I'm physically and mentally recharged because of not only being at an event, but seeing other people that are struggling, entrepreneurs, but they're seeking. And that's a characteristic. It's like, look, I know I'm struggling, but I know I can see something bigger for me out there. And that's where the support system, a mastermind group, or even individual coaching or group coaching can change everything. Because sometimes, they say you can't read the label from inside the jar, or you can't see the picture from inside the frame. That's where sometimes somebody else looking in from the outside can pinpoint, like a doctor. When you go to the doctor, they look at your symptoms.
I mean, so I'm a golfer. That's my hobby, right? So I'm back to taking my golf lessons about every 2 to 3 weeks. They're not full-fledged lessons, or 30-minute tune-ups, I call them, but because I get lost on my own, or I over-exaggerate this one thing. They call it taking the whole bottle of aspirin instead of the one aspirin. Oh, you need to do this, and instead of this, I've done this times 10. And so now you take a good thing and you made it bad because you did too much of it, right? And so I know I play my best golf when I've got a golf coach that I go see every 2 or 3 weeks, just a little tune-up, right? I know that I'm in my best shape when I'm exercising 30 minutes a day, and I have a little support group, and I got little challenges. We're going to run a half marathon. We're going to run a 10K, right? I work best when I have little goals, right? And eliminate those goals. So that's kind of what we talk about in our mastermind group. Last thing, our irresistible offer right now is we can find any business owner $50,000 in 45 minutes or less without spending $1 more on advertising or marketing. That's called our Profit Acceleration Session. So if you want to do one of those, or you're interested in our mastermind group, Matt at profitabilitymd.com, Dave at profitabilitymd.com. This podcast, Profitability MD, as well as profitabilitymd.com over our YouTube channel. Go YouTube.com/profitabilitymd. I think that's how you find us over there. Good stuff, man. I love the characteristics of an entrepreneur. You got to take action. You got to have vision. You got to be creative. You got to be persistent. You got to network. You got to be trustworthy. You got to be a problem solver. Man, there's an endless amount.
Yeah, we couldn't cover them all, but let's face it. All of those are great traits to have. And I think you got all of them too, Matt. So.
All right. Good stuff, buddy. Have a good week.
All right. Take care.
See you.